The day a woman stops making a man her only source of happiness is the day she becomes unstoppable, because she finally remembers that the one person who can light up her world has been in the mirror all along. There's a moment in life when silence teaches you more than words ever could, when the world grows quiet enough for you to hear the truth you've been overlooking. And for so many women, that truth is this: love was never meant to be begged for. Affection was never meant to be hunted down like a lost object. Presence was never meant to be negotiated or pleaded for. It was meant to flow, meant to choose you the same way you choose it. A woman who knows her worth, truly knows it, will never kneel emotionally for a man who can't even meet her halfway. She won't shrink herself. She won't soften her voice. She won't apologize for needing clarity, honesty, or reciprocation. Not because she's stubborn, but because she's awake, because she finally understands the quiet strength of being desired without having to demand it. And that realization becomes a turning point, a moment where she steps into herself with a sense of dignity that feels like coming home. I've watched many women live through the ache of asking for the bare minimum. It's a heavy kind of heartbreak, one that doesn't always come from betrayal, but from emptiness, from waiting for someone to suddenly notice the effort you've been giving all along, from hoping they'll remember your birthday, your dreams, your laugh, your worth, from believing that if you just love harder, they'll finally love back. But life has a way of teaching the truth through repetition. You can't force someone to show up for you. You can't convince someone to feel. You can't negotiate your way into someone's heart. Begging for love is like pouring water into a cracked cup. You lose yourself drop by drop, and the cup still ends up empty. There's research that shows relationships built on unequal emotional effort don't just struggle, they collapse. One partner breaks under the weight of carrying both hearts, and the other becomes comfortable with taking more than they give. A queen sees that pattern early, not because she's cynical, but because she's learned the cost of ignoring it. Once met a woman who told me she used to wait by her phone every night, hoping for a man's message. She'd stay awake until sunrise just for a chance he might say goodnight. She called it love, but the truth was she was surviving off crumbs. And crumbs can feel filling only when you've convinced yourself you don't deserve the full meal. One day, something changed. She woke up, not literally, but emotionally. She realized she hadn't felt chosen in months. She realized every smile came from her effort. Every apology came from her lips. Every plan was something she initiated. She realized she was the only one watering a garden that wasn't growing. And in that moment, she didn't cry. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply stopped trying. And that silence, it shook the ground beneath her old habits. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a moment of rebirth. A queen never begs for love because she knows real love doesn't require proof. Real love doesn't run. Real love doesn't disappear when things get slightly inconvenient. Real love doesn't leave you questioning your worth in the middle of the night. Real love chooses you clearly, consistently, and confidently. And anything less than that isn't love. It's uncertainty wearing a mask. There's something incredibly powerful about a woman who understands that if someone wanted to talk to her, they would. If someone wanted to be with her, they'd make the space. If someone valued her, their actions would echo louder than their excuses. She doesn't chase someone who keeps walking away. She doesn't cling to potential while ignoring reality. She doesn't stretch her heart to fit inside someone who's shrinking their effort. She leans back, not out of pride, but out of clarity. She creates space, and in that space, the truth walks forward. The one who wants her moves closer. The one who doesn't simply fades into the distance where he always belonged. I've seen women lose years trying to win over someone who couldn't even give them the simplest form of reassurance. someone who texted when bored, called when lonely, loved when convenient, someone who expected loyalty but never offered stability, someone who loved the idea of her but not the responsibility of choosing her. When a woman begs for love, she ends up loving alone. And loving alone is the most painful form of love because you're holding both hearts and one of them isn't beating for you. The queen understands that begging isn't a pathway to connection, it's a doorway to self-betrayal, and she refuses to step through it. She knows that the more she chases someone, the further she drifts from herself. The more she tries to earn what should be freely given, the more she disconnects from her own value. She learns that pleading for attention is a wound disguised as hope, and wounds don't heal when you keep reopening them with the wrong person. She chooses a different path, a quieter, steadier, stronger path. The path where she stands still, not frozen, but grounded, where she lets her absence speak louder than her pleas, where she lets her silence become a mirror that reveals who is meant for her and who is only passing through, where she learns that the right person doesn't need to be convinced. They recognize her worth the moment they see it. And when she finally steps into that mindset, everything changes. Her posture changes, her energy changes, her conversations change. She stops explaining herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. She stops waiting for men who keep treating her like a backup plan. She stops offering loyalty to someone who only offers confusion in return. She stops being available to someone who's unavailable to her. She learns that love should feel safe, not suffocating, respectful, not draining, equal, not exhausting. And the truth is, once she stops begging for love, she starts attracting it. Real love, healthy love, love that feels like peace, not chaos. Love that doesn't make her fear losing herself. Love that doesn't ask her to sacrifice her dignity. Love that doesn't make her question whether she's enough. Because she already knows she is. The queen never begs for love because she knows her heart is a treasure, not a discount sale for someone who doesn't recognize its value. She knows that any love she has to beg for will never be strong enough to stay. She knows that the right man won't need to be chased. He will walk beside her, meet her effort, match her energy, and choose her without hesitation. And when she realizes that, she stops pleading, she stops bending, she stops shrinking, she stands tall, calm, unshaken. And in that stillness, she becomes unforgettable. There's a quiet kind of power that rises in a woman the moment she realizes she doesn't have to destroy herself just to keep someone else comfortable. It doesn't happen suddenly. It happens the way dawn replaces night, slow, subtle, almost invisible until the light is undeniable. A woman may spend years bending, adjusting, swallowing her words, ignoring her instincts, softening her truth, just to keep a man by her side. And for a long time, she believes that's what love requires: compromise, patience, understanding, second chances. But there's a fine line between compromise and self-betrayal, and crossing it never leads to peace. A woman with a queen mindset learns this the hard way, not through theories or advice, but through the ache of giving more than she should have given, through the silence that follows every moment she wanted to speak but didn't, through the sting she feels every time she accepts less respect than she knows she deserves. And one day, something inside her breaks, not in a way that weakens her, but in a way that wakes her up. She realizes she cannot keep a man by losing pieces of herself. She realizes that self-respect isn't something you trade for affection, it's something you protect at all costs. I once listened to a woman describe how she stayed in a relationship where every argument ended with blame pointed at her. He raised his voice, he insulted her dreams, he dismissed her emotions, and somehow she still found a way to apologize, just to make the room peaceful again. She said she felt like she was always trying to earn her place in someone's life who never bothered to risk losing her. She gave excuses for him. She told her friends, he's just stressed, even when she knew that wasn't the truth. She convinced herself that if she just stayed patient, he would eventually understand her worth. But that's the trap. Patience becomes silence, silence becomes resentment, resentment becomes self-blame, and self-blame becomes a prison you decorate to make it feel like home. Studies have shown that people lose respect for what they consistently get without effort. It's human nature. When you erase your boundaries, when you say yes to everything, when you tolerate things that hurt you, the other person stops seeing the value in what you give. Not because you're worth less, but because you've taught them you'll never walk away. And nothing kills respect faster than certainty that you'll stay, no matter how you're treated. A queen never allows that certainty to exist. She knows that in a relationship, respect is not a luxury, it's the foundation. Without it, love becomes chaos. Without it, connection becomes control. Without it, the relationship stops being a partnership and becomes an emotional imbalance where she does the loving and he does the taking. The truth is, a queen is not someone who demands respect loudly. She earns it quietly by honoring her own standards. She doesn't make threats. She doesn't scream. She doesn't beg. She simply sets the tone for how she expects to be treated by the way she treats herself. And if someone cannot meet that level, she doesn't lower it. She lets them leave. I remember another woman who told me she once accepted behavior that broke her spirit in small, almost unnoticeable ways. He would cancel plans last minute. He would flirt with other women and call it innocent. He would tell her she was overreacting when she expressed hurt. She said every time she allowed it, she felt a little piece of herself fade. Not all at once, but slowly, the way a candle burns down. So slowly, you don't realize how dim the room has become until you're surrounded by darkness. Then one night, she looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She wasn't broken. She wasn't weak. She was simply empty from giving too much to someone who gave back too little. And in that moment, she understood a truth she had ignored for years. The love she wanted was impossible to receive from a man who didn't even respect himself, let alone her. A queen never reaches that point without learning something profound. Self-respect is not a shield you raise when things go wrong. It's a way of living. It's a quiet decision you make every day to honor your feelings, your needs, your emotional well-being. It's choosing honesty over convenience. It's walking away from situations that dim your light. It's refusing to negotiate with someone who benefits from your silence. When a woman truly understands this, she transforms. She starts standing taller, speaking clearer, breathing deeper. She no longer explains her value. She no longer justifies her boundaries. She no longer apologizes for wanting something real, consistent, and honest. She becomes someone who can love deeply without losing herself in the process. A man who respects her will rise to meet that energy. A man who doesn't will fall away, not because she punished him, but because he can no longer exist in a space where accountability is required, and she doesn't mourn his absence as much as she honors her return to herself. Some women believe they have to stay to prove loyalty, but loyalty to someone who disrespects you is disloyalty to your own soul. Some women believe loving harder will soften a man's behavior, but love cannot reach someone who refuses to grow. Some women believe being patient will change things, but patience with disrespect becomes permission for it. Inheriting it, a queen knows better. She chooses herself before she chooses disaster. She chooses her peace before she chooses chaos. She chooses her value before she chooses validation. And that doesn't make her cold. It makes her whole. A woman doesn't lose a man by having boundaries. She loses the wrong man by having them. And that loss is a gift because it clears the space for someone who sees her clearly, loves her deeply, and respects her without conditions. A queen never sacrifices her self-respect to keep a man because she knows the right man would never require that sacrifice in the first place. She knows that the moment she betrays herself, she leaves the throne of her own life empty. But when she stands in pride, in dignity, in truth, she becomes untouchable in the most beautiful way. She realizes she was never meant to be kept by breaking herself. She was meant to be honored by someone who recognizes her worth without her having to lose anything to prove it. There's a moment in a woman's life when she realizes she's been pouring her heart into hands that were never ready to hold it. Not because she's foolish, but because she's hopeful. Not because she's weak, but because she loves deeply. And sometimes loving deeply makes you believe you can fill the empty spaces in someone else's soul if you just give enough of yourself. But there's a truth the world eventually teaches you. No matter how much you pour into the wrong person, their cup will never overflow. It will only drain you until you forget what it feels like to be full. A woman with a queen mindset learns this truth not through textbooks or advice, but through experience, through the long nights waiting for a message that never comes, through the forced smiles after plans are canceled again, through the loneliness she feels even while giving everything she has. She tries harder. She stretches herself emotionally, mentally, sometimes financially, believing that maybe, just maybe, her consistency will inspire his, but effort doesn't inspire effort in someone who benefits from giving the bare minimum. There's a story I once heard about a woman who spent years supporting a man who couldn't even support himself. She helped him with his life plans, supported his dreams, defended him in front of her friends, and invested all her emotional energy into their future. She made excuses for his behavior just to convince herself she wasn't wasting her time, but every time she needed him, he disappeared. Every time she reached out, he pulled back. He enjoyed her warmth without offering any in return, and she called it love. But it wasn't love. It was labor, one-sided labor, dressed in devotion. When she finally stepped back, the truth became painfully clear. He didn't lack effort because he was broken. He lacked effort because he never felt he had to try. She had already given him the benefits of a committed partner without requiring the commitment. She gave the emotional consistency of a wife while he gave the effort of a stranger. And deep down, she knew she deserved better. She just hoped he would one day realize her worth. But he never did. People rarely appreciate what they never had to earn. Psychology research shows that relationships thrive only when both people invest equally, when energy, time, and emotional support flow in both directions. But when one person gives a river and the other gives a drop, resentment becomes inevitable. A queen understands this naturally. She understands that love without reciprocity is just exhaustion. She refuses to build a life around someone who barely shows up for her. She refuses to water a garden where seeds were never planted. She refuses to overinvest in a man who invests only when it benefits him. And the interesting thing is, a queen is not someone who demands extravagance. She doesn't need huge gestures or dramatic declarations. She just needs consistency. A text that says, "I'm thinking of you." A call that doesn't come with excuses. Effort that doesn't have to be begged for. She doesn't ask for perfection. She asks for participation. And if he cannot offer even the smallest form of effort, she doesn't guilt herself into staying. She doesn't try to fix him. She doesn't romanticize his potential. She accepts what's in front of her and makes her choices from that truth. There are women who bend their entire lives around a man's lack of effort. They rearrange their schedules to fit his. They lighten their standards so he feels comfortable. They shrink their needs so he doesn't feel overwhelmed. They become the planner, the communicator, the supporter, the emotional anchor, while he becomes the person who tries when he feels like it. And slowly, without realizing it, she becomes less of a partner and more of a caretaker of the relationship. And but people like that because it makes them feel like they're party and more of the caretaker of the relationship. She carries the weight of both hearts, even though only hers truly beats for the connection. A queen refuses to carry that burden. She knows that when a man wants to be in your life, he shows it, not through poetic words, but through presence, not through promises, but through patterns, not through theories, but through actions. She watches the consistency, not the charm, the behavior, not the excuses, the effort, not the potential. And if all she sees is minimal effort, she steps away before her heart becomes collateral damage. One of the most painful truths a woman can learn is that sometimes the person she is giving her all to is giving his all to someone else. And the version he shows her is the version he gives when he doesn't really care. But instead of questioning him, she questions herself. Maybe I'm too emotional. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe I need to be more patient. But a queen knows that the moment she starts negotiating her needs downward to match someone's lack of effort, she's abandoning herself. And self-abandonment is the costliest price any woman can pay. She chooses differently. She learns to match energy with energy. She gives where effort is reciprocated, not where love goes to die. She invests in a man who invests in her, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wants to. She becomes someone who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't overextend. She becomes someone who understands that real love does not require her to lose herself. It does not demand excessive effort to compensate for his emptiness. It does not drain her, weaken her, or leave her questioning her worth. When a queen walks away from a man showing minimal effort, she isn't giving up. She's choosing herself. She's choosing her peace. She's choosing the love she knows she deserves, even if it hasn't arrived yet. And the beautiful thing is, when she finally meets the man who matches her effort, she will understand why every almost had to fail. Because a relationship built on equal effort doesn't feel like work. It feels like breath. It feels like home. A queen never overinvests in a man who shows minimal effort because she knows that love that drains you isn't love, it's debt. And she was never born to live in emotional debt. She was born to rise into relationships where effort feels natural, where connection feels mutual, and where her heart is met with the same intensity it gives. There comes a moment in a woman's life when she realizes that the things she once brushed aside were never small things. They were warnings, clues, whispers from her intuition. And the truth is, those whispers always existed long before the heartache did. Red flags rarely arrive as storms. They show up as gentle discomfort, the kind you feel but try to rationalize, the kind you sense but silence because you don't want to lose the possibility of love. But every time a woman silences herself to keep someone else, she loses something far more valuable, her peace. Love can be intoxicating. It can make a woman believe she can endure anything. It can make her rewrite her own boundaries. It can make her give excuses she never thought she'd give. It can make her see someone not for who they are, but for who she hopes they could become. And that's where red flags grow roots. Not in the behavior itself, but in the hope that ignores it. I once heard a story about a woman who dated a man who constantly dismissed her feelings. Whenever she tried to talk about something that bothered her, he'd laugh and say she was overreacting. She felt a sting inside, but she let it slide because she wanted to keep the peace. Over time, those small dismissals grew into bigger ones. What began as "you're overreacting" became "you're too emotional," and eventually, "you're the problem." Each phrase chipped away at her identity. Each moment she ignored felt like a sacrifice made in the name of connection. But connection built on silencing yourself is not connection, it's loss. There's a psychological truth that people often ignore. Red flags don't reveal themselves more clearly with time, they reveal themselves more painfully. A queen understands this. She knows that patterns matter more than promises. She knows that behavior is more honest than words. She knows that if someone consistently shows you who they are, believing the potential of who they might be is self-deception dressed as hope. The world teaches women to be forgiving, patient, nurturing, and those are beautiful qualities when they are given to the right person. But when they are given to someone who treats her care as a convenience, those same qualities become the chains that tie her to a sinking ship. A queen refuses to drown while trying to save a man who isn't even swimming. There's a moment, a quiet internal shift, when she starts paying attention differently. She listens to tone, not charm. She observes patterns, not apologies. She notices how he treats her when no one is watching. She sees whether his actions match his words. She recognizes whether he takes responsibility or always plays the victim. She notices how she feels after every interaction, uplifted or drained, valued or invisible, understood or dismissed. One woman once shared that she stayed with a man for years, even though he would disappear for days without explanation. Every time he left, her chest tightened with anxiety. Every time he returned, she convinced herself it was love, but her body knew the truth. Love doesn't feel like waiting for someone who may or may not return. Love doesn't feel like begging for consistency. Love doesn't feel like instability wrapped in passion. She ignored every red flag because she feared losing him. What she didn't realize was that losing herself was already happening day by day. When she finally walked away, she said something powerful. The signs were always there. I just didn't want them to be real. And that's what so many women experience. Not blindness, just the unwillingness to shatter the illusion they've built. A queen refuses to live inside an illusion. She would rather face the pain of truth than the comfort of lies. She understands that ignoring red flags doesn't prevent heartbreak, it delays it. And the longer she delays it, the deeper the damage becomes. She chooses differently. She makes space for her intuition to speak. She gives herself permission to walk away from what doesn't feel right without needing to justify it. She trusts that her discomfort is a message, not a mistake. She understands that red flags are not obstacles to push through. They are boundaries designed to protect her from what isn't meant for her. A queen doesn't need drama to feel alive. She doesn't need uncertainty to feel passion. She doesn't mistake chaos for intensity. She knows the difference between love and emotional turbulence. She chooses clarity over confusion. She chooses peace over potential. She chooses respect over excuses. And for all, and here's the thing, she doesn't walk away because she stops caring. She walks away because she starts caring about herself too. When a queen sees a man who refuses to grow, refuses to show up, refuses to take responsibility, refuses to offer honesty, connection, or effort, she doesn't try to fix him. She doesn't try to save him. She doesn't try to carry the weight of both hearts. She steps aside and allows life to teach him what she no longer will. She knows that red flags are not signals to fight harder. They are signals to let go sooner. She knows that staying in a situation where she has to ignore herself just to feel loved is not love. It's abandonment in disguise. A queen never ignores red flags just to feel loved, because she understands something many people never learn. Love that requires her to betray her intuition isn't love at all. It's a lesson, and she is wise enough to learn it. There's a quiet strength in a woman who understands that her happiness is too sacred, too valuable, too deeply rooted to be placed in the hands of one human being. When a woman rises into her own power, she begins to realize that making a man her only source of joy is like building a home on sand, beautiful for a moment, but destined to collapse under the smallest storm. Real happiness, the kind that lives in the bones and breathes through the soul, comes from within. And when a woman understands that, everything about her changes: the way she loves, the way she waits, the way she walks away, the way she rebuilds. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she must face her own heart honestly. It is usually after she has poured herself into someone who didn't have the capacity to hold her. It is after she has tried to fix someone who didn't want to heal. After she has sacrificed sleep, dreams, confidence, and emotional peace, all just to keep someone near. That moment, though painful, becomes the doorway to an extraordinary transformation, because it is in that space of exhaustion and clarity that she finally whispers to herself, "I deserve more." And that simple, fragile sentence becomes the beginning of her freedom. Queen understands that a relationship should add to her happiness, not become the entire definition of it. She knows that love is a blessing, but never a replacement for her purpose, her passions, or her self-worth. She has learned that loneliness doesn't come from being alone. Loneliness comes from depending on the wrong person to fill the empty spaces inside her. A queen is not heartless. She feels deeply, she loves with intensity, but she never hands someone the keys to her emotional world and says, "Here, you decide if I'm worthy today." She has lived enough life to understand that giving one man the power to determine her value will always end in disappointment. Not because men cannot love, but because no human being is designed to be responsible for another person's entire emotional universe. That weight is too heavy, too suffocating, too unfair. And when a woman places her joy solely in someone else's behavior, she becomes predictable, desperate, reactive, losing pieces of herself one compromise at a time. A queen refuses to live like that. She refuses to shrink so someone else can feel tall. She refuses to silence herself to avoid conflict. She refuses to let someone else's inconsistency dictate her peace. What sets her apart is her awareness. She knows that happiness built on another person's approval is fragile. Happiness built on self-connection, purpose, and inner peace is unshakable. She understands that a man should be a partner, not a lifeline. He should be a companion on her journey, not the destination. She is whole before he arrives. She is fulfilled before he touches her hand. And because of that, her love becomes richer, purer, less driven by fear, and more grounded in freedom. There's something magnetic about a woman who knows how to enjoy her own company, who invests in her own growth, who creates joy from simple moments. A woman who reads, explores, dreams, and builds. A woman who doesn't wait for someone to choose her before she starts living. This energy pulls the right people toward her, not because she tries to impress them, but because her self-created happiness is a rare and powerful light. When she stops making one man her whole world, she begins to rediscover the parts of herself she forgot, the hobbies she abandoned, the friendships she neglected, the ambitions she paused. She begins to nurture her spirit again. She starts to heal. She starts to glow in ways she never imagined. And ironically, this is usually when the man realizes her value, not because she begged him to, but because she stopped needing him to. But she doesn't reclaim her happiness out of spite. She does it because life is too short, too fragile, too precious to waste on emotional dependence. Happiness is a garden, and she becomes the gardener. She chooses what to plant: peace, growth, creativity, self-respect. She chooses what to remove: fear, insecurity, attachment, doubt. And slowly the garden flourishes again. A queen never makes a man her only source of happiness, because she understands that her joy is her responsibility, her gift, her birthright. She knows that a man can complement her, but he should never complete her. She knows that real love feels like partnership, not possession. It feels like support, not sacrifice of the self. And she knows that when she is happy within herself, she is capable of creating a love that is steady, balanced, and lasting. Her greatest strength is not her beauty, her body, or even her confidence. It is her relationship with her own heart. When that relationship is strong, everything else falls into place. She becomes unshakable. She becomes centered. She becomes a force that cannot be manipulated or dimmed. And any man who comes into her life will feel that difference immediately. Because a queen does not seek happiness from a man, she shares her happiness with him, and that is what makes her love unforgettable. When you look at all these choices a woman with a queen mindset makes, refusing to beg for love, protecting her self-respect, investing only where there is effort, honoring the red flags she once ignored, and choosing her own happiness before placing it in anyone else's hands, you start to see a truth that changes everything. A queen isn't born, she's built. She is shaped by every moment she finally said, enough. She is strengthened by every time she walked away from what dimmed her spirit. She rises not because the world handed her a crown, but because she learned how to hold her own heart with courage and grace. And maybe that's the most powerful part of all, realizing that nothing and no one gets to define your worth except you. The love you want starts within. The loyalty you seek begins with how you treat yourself. The future you dream of grows from the choices you make today. So step into your life with the quiet confidence of someone who knows who she is, what she deserves, and what she will no longer tolerate. Because when a woman finally chooses herself, not out of pride, but out of truth, the world doesn't just respect her, it adjusts to her.